All right, do we want to just jump right in?
Yeah.
Okay, so tonight we're talking about the HAARP facility, in, I'm going to mispronounce it. It starts with a G, Alaska. First, I'm going to say G, Alaska. No, I'm
Gee,
kidding.
Alaska.
Gakona? Is that right? Gakona? Something like that? I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it. Um, but it stands for the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, right?
hmm
And so the theory sounds insane. I want to say it sounds insane. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, right off the bat, you're talking about like what people think this facility is being used for, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, when you start talking about, mind control or controlling the weather, like
Yeah.
those are pretty big concepts, big ideas for
Right.
a conspiracy theory.
Right. Controlling the weather, controlling, or be not necessarily control. I guess it'd be controlling, but controlling
Weaponize.
and
I think it's weaponizing is really kind of like
they're
how do you yeah.
weaponizing the weather, um, and also kind of pinpointing, or I guess striking at certain predetermined places with natural disasters. Another one, like earthquakes and typhoons and hurricanes and stuff like that. So, on the surface, it sounds insane, but I do want to say that I was not aware that the U.S. during Vietnam actually did weaponize the weather. Did you come across that in your research?
I did. I saw a little bit about that and I mean, I think the idea is that not that I don't know, not that this technology doesn't exist, like it kind of exists in a way. Um but it's sort of like to what extent, you know?
Right.
So I don't know, do you want to give more detail about that incident?
Yeah. So I say weaponize the weather, and it really should be like massive air quotes, weaponizing the weather. It isn't like they're, at least from the past and what they did in Vietnam. It's not like they caused acid rain or anything like that. But what they did do is they increased the amount of rainfall by an estimate of 30% between uh, 1967 and 1968. And the idea behind this was that if they increased the rainfall, it would reduce the infiltration in the Ho Chi Minh Trail. I don't think it worked. Like, I don't think it really worked because Vietnam was a big loss for the United States,
Right.
and just in terms of no one really won that war, we'll say. Um, and then they also, um, which is less, I guess it'd be considered part of the weaponizing the weather, whatever. They dropped salt um, on the air base of, I'm gonna mispronounce this, Kisan, maybe, to reduce the fog that would happen. And so that was the general idea of quote unquote weaponizing the weather. Um, but the interesting thing is that it's part of the Geneva Convention that you can't do it. Like, you can't do it. You can't weaponize the weather. Like, you can't use the weather in terms of, like, you can't modify the weather to further your cause, I
Really?
guess.
I didn't know that it was. Oh, okay. Huh.
Yeah. But the issue with, like, I guess the wording is that it permits it permits local non-permanent changes. So like increasing the amount of rain, um, you know, decreasing the amount of rain, stuff like that. That would be okay as part of the Geneva Convention. but you can't do like long lasting effects. Like you couldn't I don't know, permanently increase the amount of rainfall in an area. Um,
I mean, is that even possible? I mean, I guess the kind of permanent aspect would be that whatever they're doing to temporarily create some change, they could just potentially keep doing to keep
right,
creating that change.
right,
Or I guess in terms of local, you couldn't be, in the United States and send a hurricane, to tear across another country or something.
right. And the so one of the interesting things is let me find his name real quick. This gentleman from Stanford, uh, Umran Enan, he says that there's nothing that we can do to disturb the Earth's weather systems. But I find that interesting because we did it in Vietnam. Now,
Mm,
it might not be like exactly the same thing, like because this is like the conspiracy theory, that he's talking about. Like, you can't control the weather to further your own cause or hurt those of your enemies,
mhm.
but kind of did it. Like
Yeah, it kind of
we
happened.
we kind of did it, and we did it, and it's obviously a real thing because, like I said, it's part of the Geneva Convention. So
So how did you read into detail about what created the increase in rain?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so it's called cloud seeding,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and so basically, what they do is they let's see, hang on, how does this work? So they put silver iodide, yeah, or something, silver iodide, potassium iodide, dry ice, something, um, into the atmosphere, and it like increases the snowfall, which increases the rainfall. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it basically, like, they put it up into the cloud, and it creates snow, which then turns into rain, and it kind of that's how it happened.
Gotcha.
So I mean, there's different ways you could do it. Um, there's even table salt is like apparently a newer methodology of doing it. Just like sending particles of table salt up into the clouds, and that is what happens. It's
Yeah, I guess, listening to me there seems to be there's kind of a line though when you're talking about weaponized weather because those examples to me are more like weather modification,
mhm,
which, yeah, they were used in a way to benefit, the person using them.
mhm,
But that, when I think of, weaponizing weather, and I think these are some of the big conspiracies about HAARP, is that, they're creating earthquakes or targeted earthquakes
right,
or targeted hurricanes or these giant forces of nature to cause mass destruction, like
right,
on a grand scale.
right,
So, it's like I said before, the kind of the beginnings of that technology, or maybe not even the beginnings, but enough of that technology is there. The fact that we can increase rain or we can affect fog or whatever it is, I feel like that's just enough for people to take that and go, like expand it 100-fold, right? It's like,
right,
oh, well, if we can do this,
right.
then there must be, top secret government facilities trying to figure out how to control hurricanes.
Right. And you're absolutely 100% right. I mean, it's a very far cry from increasing the rainfall by 30% to sending a targeted earthquake to Japan, in
Right.
2011, because that's one of the conspiracy theories that they think that the HAARP facility caused the giant earthquake that hit Japan in like 2011 or whatever. Um, that caused that meltdown of that nuclear reactor.
Mhm.
Um, so that's like one of the conspiracy theories is that they caused that earthquake. Um,
Yeah.
but it's a far cry. It's a far jump from just increasing the rain. So I agree with you that
Yeah.
increasing the rain to like wash out a trail, you know, in Vietnam so that your enemies can't get through it or they have a tougher time getting through it. That to me isn't exactly weaponizing the weather.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Um,
still very tactical, and you
oh yeah,
are using the weather. You're manipulating the weather to your advantage, but yeah, it's not what I would consider weaponized weather.
right.
But I think a lot of this stems from sort of the origins of the facility. I don't know if we want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we can. You want to start?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to touch a little bit on sort of the history of the facility. So it I guess construction on it started in 1993, and then everything the main I guess component of the facility, which is the IRI machine, which stands for what is that? Ionospheric Research Instrument. So that's kind of like the big instrument in this facility. So that was finished in 2007. But I think a big part of the spike in these conspiracies is who actually funded the building of this facility. So you have, the Air Force, the Navy. I think there's the University of Alaska Fairbanks that we were all kind of involved in donating money to this project. But the one that that is kind of questionable is DARPA, which is the
Hmm.
Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, which has kind of, I mean, that's like a whole separate, like we could probably have a whole like individual episode about conspiracies just around DARPA,
Mhm.
because they kind of have their hands in suspicious projects.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even the name of it, you know, advanced research projects for defense,
Right.
is kind of can be kind of shady. So, my thought is that that's where a lot of these conspiracies come from. Why is DARPA funding this? If it's only supposed to be a facility that, is researching communication methods, or I don't know. To me, that's kind of like a big red flag and a big part of the conspiracy.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. And also to add to that, I mean, it isn't just who funded it, it's like the way they carry themselves about stuff. I mean, other, research facilities in the United States, it's like, oh, I want to take a tour. Okay, well, come on by. Like, we have a visitor time. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
even Area 51, they give tours of Area 51. Um, But like with the HAARP facility, they were like, "Nah, that's not going to happen. You can't come in," and
Yeah.
that's always going to raise, you know, few eyebrows when you're having these top secret weather experiments,
Mhm.
and then when someone's like, "Hey, can we see what's going on? Can we?" We're kind of interested, and they're like, Maybe not."
Well, I think you bring up a couple of interesting points. I want to touch on the Area 51 though first, because I know that, I mean, for a long time, the government didn't acknowledge Area 51,
Mhm.
right? So it was kind of only after people saying, we know it exists, like, we have proof, like, when are you going to actually start acknowledging it, that
Right.
they finally did. So, I have read a lot of things saying, it's kind of the same with HARP. If we shed enough light on what could potentially be going on there, will the government finally acknowledge, maybe some acknowledge something about the facility, you
Right.
know. But another one of your points is that so the facility when it was first built, you're correct. They weren't giving tours. Like there was definitely a lot of shady behavior. But there was a point, I think it was either 2013 or 2014, one of those years. Basically, uh the Navy, the Air Force, they were like, "We don't want this facility anymore." Like
Right.
they just gave it up. They're like, "We don't want it." And they had put so much money into this facility that it ended up getting acquired by I think the university, right?
Yeah, correct.
The Alaska Fairbanks University acquired it. But after that point, I know for sure now they actually do tours.
Right.
They do like a couple of times a year. They'll be like, "Hey, come check out the facility." Um, Partially because of all of the conspiracy theories around uh, this place. And to me it's just interesting though that once the big players in government sort of handed this off, then it was like, oh sure, like come check it out, we're doing, everything's above bar. Like everything's great, we're not doing anything shady here, you know
Yeah.
uh but only after that point, right?
Right. And here's the interesting thing. You're correct. They do give out tours now. However, when the Navy and the Air Force and all those people, when they were like, you know what, we're gonna be like a little kid, and we don't want this toy anymore, right? When they stepped away, it like it not only shut down the project, it shut down the facility. They completely dismantled that facility, and then in the following year, that's when the university took over and rebuilt it. That's when they started giving tours. So,
Yeah.
to play the part of the conspiracy theorist, which we all know that I am, it makes it seem like they shut it down, they dismantled all their crazy stuff that they were doing, and then they reopened it, and then they were like, "Yeah, you can come in and take tours, of course."
Yeah.
You know
And
what I'm saying?
it's kind of sad. There's a video on YouTube that I came across. I don't know if you saw it, but I think it's I can't remember who did it, but basically this guy is interviewing current employees of the facility, and they're like, "Yeah, we get death threats like on a daily basis and people hate us."
Most of them are probably from
And
Jesse Ventura.
yeah, it's just like I feel so bad for these guys.
Hmm?
But they're trying so hard to prove that they're not doing anything shady, but there's, like you said, playing the part of the conspiracy theorist. There's all this leftover like, you know, hate from, when it was owned by these uh government agencies.
Yeah, yeah. I think that it's okay. I think that people probably took the idea of a conspiracy theory with them, and they were like, "Okay, that's kind of weird." But then, as I mentioned before, Jesse Ventura, right? The former, what was he, senator of Minnesota or governor of Minnesota, one of the two. Um, he's also a former wrestler. If anybody knows, Jesse Ventura is. Uh, he's he's a super big believer in conspiracy theories. So like when someone that prominent starts like picking up the idea of there being something wrong with it, it's gonna like snowball. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And so I think with this theory, he's just as much to blame as them actually doing shady stuff.
Yeah, like the proliferation
Right.
of this idea.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
to the point where he was actually like he went to the place with his crew and they were like, "Nah, you can't come in." He's
So
like,
that
"But
that
I'm
was
Jesse Ventura."
when
So,
so he did that when the government agencies were still kind of had their hands on it.
mhm, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there's another so it's kind of another big advocate of these theories that I found. His name is Nick Begich.
Mhm.
And so he is, I think he is, I don't know if he's still senator, former senator somewhere in Alaska. And his parents were politicians. So he was kind of, involved in a lot of this growing up, but he's a very big proponent of the HAARP facility, uh trying to weaponize weather and mind control, the whole mind control aspect, which we haven't touched a whole lot on yet, but
Yeah.
basically the use of the facility to influence people. I'm gonna so in this book, where is it, I found where, like, all the different things. Okay, so he wrote a book on it. It's called Angels Don't Play This Harp.
Of course it is. Yeah.
So basically in the book he's talking about the facility being used to generate earthquakes, modify weather, control people's minds, map the Earth's interior, generate ultra powerful laser like power beams, transmit wireless power, and more.
Yeah.
So this guy's like diving into a whole bunch of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's a ton of videos on YouTube. Like, you can watch his seminars and his talks. Like, he goes really deep into this stuff.
Well, okay. I mean, yeah, he definitely. I think he's a little bit more believable, more of a believable source than Jesse Ventura.
Yeah.
Just because nothing against the body, nothing against Jesse the Body Ventura, but he's a bit freaking out there. All right,
He
I've
is,
li-
but he has the reach. I mean, he has that star power to kind of, like I said, proliferate
right,
this conspiracy.
right, and I see that, but in my mind, this gentleman Nick Beg, do you say
Baggage.
it?
I think it's
Um,
baggage.
I think he is a bit more of a believable source because like you said, his parents were in politics, his brother is in politics still, or you used to be. So like he's probably in the know. He would be in the know out of those people. Now, not I mean Jesse the Body Ventura was former governor, but of Minnesota, not Alaska. So what the hell does he know?
Okay. Well, I did see an interview with Bagage where, obviously he sold this book, right? This
Hmm,
book it's been selling for the past 20 years. I think in the video he said he's made at least $1 million off of it. And then later in the video, he was asked, "Have you ever visited the facility?" Because obviously now, like we said, they give tours, and he actually refused to visit the facility. Now,
really?
whether that's because he knew he wouldn't find anything, since now that it's transferred hands, maybe it's not worth his time. I don't know, but he, like, very adamantly didn't want to visit the facility. So that was a little bit strange.
Maybe he's worried that they're going to control his mind.
Maybe, yeah. Well, he needs to break out his tinfoil hat.
He does. Or what if this, leading it back to last episode, HAARP is actually run by the lizard people, and they're using. No, I'm done. I'm done with the lizard people. I'm just kidding.
I don't
But
know. I mean, I think that there are some people that kind of link this to, back to the Illuminati, right? I mean, I think, like
Illuminati's
we've
in
gone over
everything.
before, you can link anything to the Illuminati, probably.
Yeah, you can.
But I mean, the idea of mind control, there's the chemtrails, like the weather manipulation. It is very Illuminati-esque.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, so okay, so obviously we know what mind control would be used for, right? But
Hmm.
what really can you hope to gain from weaponizing the weather? What what could you gain? Because all the conspiracy theories that involve the weather with the HAARP facility, it's like, oh, they made this earthquake happen in Japan, but like we're pretty tight with Japan. You
Mhm.
know, to me it would make more sense if they were sending earthquakes and hurricanes and stuff to our enemies, right? Like,
Right.
doesn't that seem like common sense?
Yes.
Okay,
But usually nothing about conspiracy theories rooted in common sense.
all right, that's fair. That's a fair point.
I mean,
I
I think I mean, I think it could be argued that again, if you want to bring it back to the lizard people, they obviously have their own agenda, but I guess you could argue that there are there can be strategic strikes, right? So I don't know, maybe by crippling an ally, you I mean that causes something else to happen. Like maybe it's not as, blatant as, hey, we're going to send a hurricane into Russia or wherever, like wherever
right,
we choose to send it, right? But it's more like a chess game,
right.
you're thinking, 5, 6, 7 moves ahead. I don't know, that's kind of what I would see from that.
Or even even just a domino effect. Like you send an
Yeah.
earthquake to your ally, which cripples them. They need your aid, increasing revenue here, and then in which case, I don't know, something like that. Like it kind of builds and builds and builds until you're the next superpower because you earthquaked Ethiopia, whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think it's definitely more of like a strategic strike. So not just like hitting the people you would imagine you would attack if you could weaponize weather. Um, you know, it's
Oh,
interesting ideas though.
it's a very interesting idea. I think that I think the conspiracy theory itself is a little bit far fetched. Like we said, there's a big difference between weaponizing the weather and controlling the weather to
Mhm.
gain a tactical advantage. Um, so I think that, and here's a reason why I think that it seems a little bit far fetched is that one of the things they say is like, oh, well, they can cause hurricanes to happen. So where did they cause hurricanes to happen? Katrina and Wilma and what was the other big one? Rita? Is that what it?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So like they cause all these ones to happen, and Katrina is like massively devastating. Um, they're still feeling the effects today, and such so on and so forth. And so it's like, why would they do that to our own people? Just to prove that they can, or is there an advantage to doing that?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about it during our lizard people episode, but the idea of causing distractions
Mm-hmm.
or turning attention away from something else that might be happening in politics at the time, that could be a potential advantage. If people are worried about this impending natural disaster on their home turf,
Mm-hmm.
then that's what the news is going to be covering, right? Not a bill that's being passed that's potentially controversial, or any number of things that the government would want to try and sweep under the rug.
Yeah. Here's an interesting thought. Are you a fan of football at all? Like NFL football?
Not really.
Have you heard of the conspiracy theory that it's all like predetermined?
No.
Okay.
Just like
So
another distraction kind of theory.
kind of. Okay. So 9/11 happens, right? And it's devastating, right? But
Hmm.
we all came together as like a country for that. And then the very next year, the Patriots win the Super Bowl, the New England Patriots. Um, and then Katrina happens, right? And then the very next year, New Orleans Saints win the Super Bowl. So it's like it kind of. I think Boston also won. Boston Red Sox won the Super Bowl or not the Super Bowl, the World Series, like after the Boston bombing, the marathon bombing that happened recently or a few years back. So like the idea is that these natural disaster or these things happen, and then the team wins because of that. Um,
Oh, so like the idea is that someone's causing these disasters to happen so that they'll win the Super Bowl? Is that where this is going?
well, okay, it's like a distraction because what if you're a sports fan? Okay, there. Okay, so Kansas City Chiefs just won the Super Bowl, right?
Uh-huh.
The first time in 50 years. They shut this entire city down, like for the parade. It was closed. It was closed. So like it's a huge distraction, and for one night, you know, no one cared about anything else but that game
Right.
or that win, whatever. So like, what better way to distract the people than to rig, so to speak, the grandest stage of them all, which is the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, I get you.
I guess it's far fetched, but this whole idea is far fetched. So that
Yeah.
they would cause a natural disaster on our own turf to distract people from what's really going on underneath our noses.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, then that totally ties into this is sort of, you know, quote, weaponizing the weather
Mhm.
to cause these distractions. Yeah, I mean it's about as plausible as any of the other conspiracies we've talked about, you know. But I think that's kind of sort of a core concept in a lot of these is the idea of using something big to cause a distraction
Mhm.
amongst the sheeple or
I mean,
whoever.
that would really all tie back into the Illuminati if you think about it.
It would everything ties back to the Illuminati.
Everything ties back to either the Illuminati or Trimmers.
Yeah.
It's one or the other.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I think the idea though behind the facility itself, or the original idea, I guess, to like study the atmosphere and the the things that we really don't understand about the atmosphere, like the aurora borealis. I could talk, stuff like that. That's really cool. That would interest me to know that stuff. But it's also interesting to know if they're using it to mind control people and send earthquake.
Yeah, I mean the original purpose of the facility it is neat. I mean it's trying to further technology for radio communications and like other surveillance type things. So like inherently or I guess the reason presented for this facility like there's still cool stuff happening or potentially happening at the facility. Um even if it isn't a conspiracy, but
I do think though that if you maybe not, I mean, yes, with the earthquakes, you could devastate an entire country or an entire region for years if the earthquake was big enough.
mhm.
Same with a hurricane. But if you could theoretically control like thunderstorms or lightning storms, you could like do some real damage to an enemy. If you were able to like take out their radar with it, cause some
Mhm.
kind of magnetic interference, or even their planes that are carrying like their troops or their weapons or whatever. Um, you could literally cripple an entire country with just some flashes of lightning and you know stuff like that.
Oh yeah. So basically, if we could harness the power of Storm from X-Men and then like magnify it by 100,
Yes,
yeah, you'd be tearing down countries.
yeah, you could tear, you'd be unstoppable.
Yeah.
And that's why Storm's the best X-Men. Thank you for coming to our TED Talk.
Right. I mean, it's pretty
Um,
hard to beat Storm. She's pretty cool.
she is pretty cool. I thoroughly enjoy Storm. Um, is there anything else to talk about? I mean, we've kind of talked about it. Like, what do you think? What do you think it's far fetched? Do you think it's plausible? Do you think it's happening?
You know, I don't know. I'm kind of torn about this one because I also watched some videos. There are quite a few um pretty well-known scientists who have spoken out or spoken up about HAARP. One of them being Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Mm,
But you know, his I guess the conspiracy theorists say, if the government um was able to control the weather, or if the government was able to make these scientific advancements, wouldn't they use them for something kind of shady and evil? Whereas, the scientists who argue the exact opposite say, that's not HAARP, that's not what the HAARP facility is for. It's purely scientific research and
mm,
around communications. And basically their argument is, have you ever been in government? Do you know how government works? And if you did, you would know that a lot of the people in government really aren't that adept at much.
that's fair.
Like, you know, so I don't know, I guess that kind of hits a lot of conspiracy theories on the head, right? Do you actually believe that the government is manipulative and shady and really on top of all this stuff, or are they just normal people who yeah, I don't know, but that kind of got off topic a little bit. But I
Okay.
think in terms of HAARP, I don't know. To me, it is very shady that, once the facility passed hands, once the government was no longer involved, then there was open communication about what the facility did. There were tours, there was all this documentation that was open to the public, but it's like only after that point. So I don't know. To me, it does. It seems a little bit odd. So, I don't know if I believe that they were exactly trying to control the weather, or definitely not using it for mind control. But
Mm,
I mean, maybe there was something going on that they didn't want people to know about?
yeah. I see. I kind of fall into the it's plausible, but probably not likely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just really for the simple fact that it's part of the Geneva Convention. The
Yeah.
fact like that's it's got to be something. It's at least been talked about in these meetings, with the UN and stuff. Um, to the point where they were like, okay, well, we have to put a clause in here that you can't do that. Um, so that makes me think that, and that was back in the 70s. So
Yeah.
like, that's got to be, it's got to be something. And to
Mm-hmm.
the fact that the technology has improved so much over the past, 40 years, 50 years, um, they've got to be at least close to being able to manipulate the weather. Um, so I think, like I said, I think it's plausible, but probably not likely. I
Yeah.
think they can definitely I think they can definitely manipulate the weather. Whether they can control and create the weather is another situation, another story.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, yes, the government likes to hide things from the public. Is it as big and grand and malicious as weaponizing weather and mind control? I would agree. It's plausible but not probable.
Right. Okay, so Ikami Blackmoon says the real conspiracy: what if the weather control device is being used to spread the coronavirus through rainfall?
That would be terrifying,
That
honestly.
that would be pretty terrifying. I'm not gonna lie. However, I don't think that's likely. Just because someone in Kansas recently was diagnosed with the virus, and it has not rained here, and how I don't even know how long. We've gotten snow, but no rain. So
Well, they didn't have to be in Kansas to get hit by
fair,
rain.
fair
Maybe they
point,
were somewhere else.
fair point, fair point. I don't know. It's an interesting thought. Snow is just frozen rain. That's true. But I feel like if it got cold enough, would it still survive?
There's a lot of weird bacteria and viruses that are like up in the snow caps,
That's true.
Antarctic. So I think it just puts them in stasis.
Could be
What? Why am I getting a fail?
because you
Poor
failed.
his poor historian gave me a fail.
You know what else is in the polar ice caps? Graboids.
That's true, according to the fifth Tremors
Sixth,
movie.
sixth movie.
Sixth Tremors movie.
It's the sixth one. Everything comes back to Tremors. Don't hate. They're all on Netflix. If you watch them all. Um, that's all I got. Do you have anything else you want to talk about with this?
I don't think so. I mean, you know, no. I mean, I guess I will say that I think after researching this conspiracy, it feels like it's not really front and center anymore after that. Um, although I'm sure it's still around, but um, I just found a lot of like older information from at least a few years ago.
Mhm.
Um, so it's kind of I wonder if as things move forward, if this conspiracy will kind of die down a little bit.
Could be, or I mean, it could pick back up if something big happens. It's probably one of those theories that like kind of picks up steam whenever any kind of natural disaster happens.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
and then it kind of like lays low whenever everything's kind of quiet.
Yeah, I'm sure
Um,
it's not going to be the last we hear
oh,
about weaponizing weather, whether or not it's through the HAARP facility. I'm sure it's going to pop up again.
yeah. Maybe they did like with Area 51 and Area 52, right? They just moved the location for HARP like down the road, and it's just like
Right.
it's just HARP 2.
Right. Top secret facility
Yeah, top secret.
down the street.
Don't come over here. Don't look at us because we don't exist. Um, yeah, I don't have anything else. I did enjoy this one. I did enjoy this one though.
Mhm.
Um, it was really interesting and a nice break from the lizard people talk.
Yeah. Yeah. It was I think the whole idea of weaponized weather is just interesting in itself, but yeah. Wasn't even aware of the heart facility until you mentioned it. So, I'm glad we talked about this one.
I remember hearing about it in a stuff they don't want you to know podcast a while back,
Mhm.
and it was like, I mean, it was probably years ago that I listened to that episode, but then I can't remember why I thought about it, but I thought about it recently. Um, the idea of like weaponizing weather, and then it reminded me of the HAARP facility. I was like, this is a pretty good one. The idea of weaponizing weather, because it kind of gets back to like what we started with, like thought provoking things and less outlandish, ridiculous things.
Lizard people were pretty outlandish. When we started getting into the fourth dimension, uh, things took a weird turn.
Things took an even weirder turn when we were learning that Hitler was riding mammoths and high fiving giants in the center of the earth.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that was our strangest episode yet.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, now that we've kind of talked about weaponizing weather, you have any ideas about what you'd like to talk about next? Or
Dude,
do you have any recommendations from chat?
James
I
Bond or any of the other spy movies that had weather control devices. That's actually true. That is one of the James Bond weaponizing the weather. Um, I do like James Bond. Side note: speaking of James Bond, I was watching The World Is Not Enough tonight, and it made me realize that the Pierce Brosnan James Bond movies are just like not good.
really.
Yeah, for as much love as GoldenEye gets, it's really just not good compared to older James Bond movies. I'll say it, they're just not good. Pierce Brosnan is a good James Bond, but his movies kind of suck. That's what I'll say. Um, Side note: the new James Bond movie's coming out soon, and it looks freaking awesome. So
Who uh is it the same guy?
Daniel Craig, yeah,
Yeah.
and I always mispronounce his name. Remy Malek
Mm.
is the villain in this
Oh,
one, so it looks like it's gonna be really good. Um, Called No Time to Die.
got no time.
I'm excited. Um, but as far as the next episode, Daniel Craig is best new Bond since Connery changed your mind. Um, I will disagree with you, Black Moon, humbly. I will say Daniel Craig is really good, and he's the best since Roger Moore. Roger Moore was a really good Bond. Timothy Dalton sucked. He sucked. His movies sucked. Um, they're two of the worst Bond movies I've ever seen in my life. In fact, and I would rank them at the lowest of the low. Even George Lazenby, with his one singular role as James Bond, is better than Timothy Dalton. Um, and then Pierce Brosnan is a good Bond, but his movies suck. But Daniel Craig's movies, Quantum of Solace is pretty much the only one that doesn't isn't very good. But the rest of them are pretty solid. Anyways, as far as the next episode, speaking of HAARP, we could, like you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we could talk about DARPA and some conspiracy theories surrounding that,
We could.
if you
There
want.
are plenty to go around, I'm
Right?
sure, with DARPA.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. So that's my thought. If you have any other thoughts, Biscuit, let me know. If anybody in chat has a thought, you can reach out to me or Biscuit, um, or you can email us at tinbiscuitreviews@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter at tinman or tinbiscuit, or that's it, tinbiscuit. That's it, right there. Other than that, I have nothing else.
Yep, I got nothing.
All right. Well, I appreciate you talking with me. I appreciate everybody for stopping by and listening. It means a lot. Until
Yep.
next time, guys, have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. See you, Tin